This is the S2G podcast, where we share conversations that help us understand how to scale the food, agriculture, oceans, and energy transitions. I'm your host, Tanya Bekritzes. In this episode, we hear from Frank Reig, CEO of fast-charging and electric rideshare company Revel, about his vision to accelerate the development of charging infrastructure in cities. As a reminder, this content is for informational purposes only. It should not be taken as legal, business, tax, or investment advice, or be used to evaluate any investment or security, and is not directed at any investor or potential investor in any investment vehicle sponsored by S2G. Investing involves risk, including the risk of loss. Specific companies mentioned in this podcast are for educational purposes and should not be construed as an endorsement of any kind. Please note that S2G may maintain investments in some of the companies discussed on this podcast. For more important information, please see s2gventures.com/disclosures. Which came first? Electric vehicles or the charging stations to support them? It's a chicken or egg situation, or a two-sided marketplace problem, and one that our guest on this episode, Frank Reig, knows a lot about. If you were walking around New York City a few years ago, you almost certainly saw the iconic blue Revel mopeds zipping around town. Today, you'll see that same blue exterior, but this time on an electric vehicle. And if you were in New York last week, you might have seen the first vehicles pull up to Manhattan's newest fast-charging station.
There we go.
This is Frank at the ribbon cutting for Revel's 10 newest charging stalls at Pier 36 on the Lower East Side.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this afternoon for the ribbon cutting. It's also been a very busy climate week here in New York, so really appreciate the support. Today is a very exciting day both for Revel as well as New York City. I'm standing in front of Revel's 4th public charging station here in New York City. Not only is this Revel's first station in Manhattan, it's also the first fully public 24-hour fast charging hub in this borough. So this is definitely a moment to mark.
Over the last few years, Revel has been remaking itself into an electric vehicle rideshare and fast charging station company, hoping to seed the demand for more charging infrastructure in cities. Luckily, our managing partner, Chuck Templeton, also happens to be well-versed in two-sided marketplaces, having worked on some of the first ones, namely OpenTable and Grubhub. Check out our previous episodes with Chuck for more on those stories. In this episode, Chuck and Frank discuss the learnings from Revel's first iteration, how to make major business model pivots, the importance of understanding your target market, and the value of working closely with regulatory bodies and other partners along the way. Building large-scale energy infrastructure is an extremely critical and daunting task, and this conversation offers insights into the obstacles and opportunities for getting these big projects through to completion.
I'm thrilled to be here today with Frank Reig, the co-founder of Revel. Frank, if maybe you could quickly introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about the founding of Revel.
Yeah, absolutely, Chuck. I definitely have an interesting pathway to co-founding and now leading Revel as CEO over the last 7 years. My personal background, I actually worked as a high-end New York City chef for about 5 years after my undergraduate time, so from 2007 to about 2012. Ended up going back to graduate school. I thought I wanted to work in government. That lasted about a year. Spent about 4 years in a private consulting company called Gerson Lehrman Group, GLG. Ended up leading their energy team across North America, working with hedge fund and private equity clients. And while I was doing that, in December of 2017, I took a personal vacation to Buenos Aires, Argentina. And I was just sitting there. That's the summer down there in the Southern Hemisphere. And man, that is a Vespa town. That is a moped town. I remember just having coffee and just looking into the streets and being like, no one's in the car. Everyone is on some sort of Vespa type moped vehicle. And I just thought, why is a vehicle type like this not in a city like New York? So when you think about the genesis of Revel 7 years ago, obviously we've gone through pivots since then as a business, but that is the initial light bulb moment. Just sitting there having coffee and seeing everybody on a moped. And then thought, this has to go to New York. And then I come back to New York in January 2018. I cannot stop thinking about this. Started doing some research. I think like any potential entrepreneur, just Googling things, mopeds, you start to realize, there's these shared electric moped systems popping up in San Francisco and Europe. I wasn't even sure whether to do gas or electric at the time. Quickly, I realized, no, it's electric. We need to do that. Got my co-founder on board, Paul Suey. And then we were quitting our jobs by April 2018, and we launched 68 electric mopeds in the streets of Brooklyn in July 2018. We basically went from light bulb moment in December 2017 to hardware in the streets of New York City 6 months later. It was pretty wild. We also raised $1 million from 57 different investors. Imagine how brutal that process was. A lot of $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 checks, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that's very cool. So here you are, you got these, you said about 60 mopeds running around the city. So what were some of the things you learned in that process that have guided the company? What were some of the insights that popped up there?
Maybe a more humorous side first. You better be naive to be an entrepreneur.
Yes, ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance is bliss because it is really hard. It is really hard. Everything you're doing, you're hearing no's. Everything you're doing is you're hearing, that doesn't make sense. Imagine talking to regulators and politicians about bringing mopeds to a city like New York, not requiring a motorcycle license, right? So everything is a headwind. But it's also a lot of goddamn fun.
Yes.
It's your idea, it's your baby, you're pushing this forward, you're finding the investment dollars, you're finding the people to believe in what you're doing. And I'll always remember the first day we launched that service in July of 2018, we did a press conference. It was pretty incredible. I remember just sitting after doing some interviews and I was just lying against some wall in Bushwick, Brooklyn. And somebody passed by on a Revel moped that wasn't my brother or a cousin or Paul. And I just thought, holy shit, that's a real customer that just signed up in the last 2 hours and is now riding a moped in New York City called Revel. That's unbelievable. So those are the kind of things where you're mixing the good and the bad, but it is a journey for sure.
Yeah. And how did you try and get to the economics? What was the initial thinking on the economics model? How did you come up with pricing?
It's a good question because at that stage, Chuck, you know this from starting your own business back in the day, you're making it up as you go along. That is the realistic truth, right? Let's say we did put together a financial model. I remember Paul's brother worked in private equity at the time, so he was helping us. We were thinking through what is the pricing model. I remember talking to Paul for months about what our pricing model should be. Eventually, we ended up at a $25 sign-up fee and just a price per minute. You could have gone 20 different ways on that. So I think like any business, you just got to put something out there and then quickly learn to iterate.
Yeah.
So for instance, we quickly took away that $25 sign-up fee. Why do we have that as a barrier? That was a dumb idea. So anyway, it's like anything in a startup and entrepreneurship, you put it out into the wild and you just quickly iterate and learn and change and adapt. And I think that's what we do.
Very nice. And so, you certainly had some customers using the product and zipping around the city. And so what were some of the habits that you saw that started to formulate how you might take the business going forward? Were there problems with theft or did the pricing model not quite work? Like what were some of the things that you pivoted or learned early on in that?
It's interesting. Again, it goes back to being so naive when we started this business. I remember when we first launched the service and then we started talking to more institutional seed investors within the VC world. And I remember hopping on these calls and they're immediately asking about LTV of customers, CAC of customers. And I remember going on mute and turning to Paul and be like, what the hell is that? But you quickly learn. And then you quickly start to look at your own data and be like, oh, okay, what is our CAC?
CAC, by the way, is customer acquisition cost, or the amount of revenue it takes to acquire a new customer.
How are we forecasting long-term value of a customer when we acquire them? How much should we spend on acquiring them? So again, this all goes back to one of the things I always tell entrepreneurs that are thinking about ideas or thinking about raising money, just go have investor calls. Meetings. Take every one because you learn so much with each one because you start to understand their questions and it informs how you start to think about your business and run your business and adapt your business. And then each meeting or call you take, you're able to better answer those questions and your business is just better for it. So sometimes I'll talk to entrepreneurs and it's like, yeah, I've talked to 4 or 5 investors. Are you kidding me? For a seed round, I probably talked to 125.
Yeah.
Like talk to everybody. So that's something in terms of advice.
Yeah. Yeah. Not the, I guess, best expression for investors, but you got to kiss a lot of frogs, right? To really
so many frogs.
Where the jewels come from, right? Sort of thing. And so you've got this business that's mopeds, electric. And why electric? What was the thinking there on that?
It was pretty simple. It was, this is where the future is going. So why start a business in the past? That just didn't make sense to us. We could have started with gas mopeds. There were plenty of technology to do that. Would have had longer range, probably would have simplified the operations, honestly. But then you have a 2-wheel vehicle polluting more than a pickup in a lot of cases. So that just didn't make sense to us. So we quickly just, once you look at the situation, say, okay, let's build this business for the future where the world is going. And definitely was the right move.
And was the marketing of that originally something that you thought consumers would appreciate? Did you lean on the electric aspect? And was that a reason they liked it?
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that because I think a lot of customers had no idea it was even electric.
Hmm.
When you actually spoke to our customers like we did, I would stop people who were looking at the vehicle or on the vehicle and were clearly about to start a ride, and I'd just ask them questions. They didn't even know if it was electric or not sometimes. I think what they did know is that here's a blue vehicle that stands out and it looks cool.
Yeah.
So it goes back to how did we acquire users? I think one of the best decisions we ever made was just make the vehicle blue.
Yeah.
Each one is just this billboard going through the city and just gets eyes on it. I'm sure there were people that definitely saw it was electric and loved that aspect of it, but a lot of them are just people that want to get from point A to point B, and they saw something blue and they saw somebody else riding it and they signed up. It goes back to just like talking to your customer and actually understanding what they're using it for.
Yeah, totally. The visceral need of what they've got. How do you solve that need? And yes, if you can do it more efficiently or eloquently with electric opportunity that thinks about the future and all that, great. But yeah, it cuts back to the main thing that they needed, which is transportation from one spot to another, dependable, right? And cost effective. And so you've pivoted now from that. What were some of the observations that you made that you decided that the pivot was the right solution for you?
So just for listeners, after that initial pilot through the summer of 2020, so 2 years later, we ended up scaling that business to 6 different markets, went from 68 mopeds to 6,000. New York alone went from 1,000 mopeds to over 3,000. So very significant expansion. Raised a seed round of about $4 million at the end of 2018 and raised a Series A of 30 million plus in the summer of 2019. So really just expanded that through 2020. I think what we saw, if I'm being just totally transparent here, is we expanded to 6 markets, wanted to bring this business nationwide, and the unit economics really only worked in New York City. And that was a problem because now you just spent all this capital expanding your whole team, expanding your operations, taking on a lot more cost acquiring these vehicles and going into these other markets, and the markets aren't working. And that was really tough.
Was it a density issue, or why weren't the other markets working?
San Francisco was working until COVID hit. So that really hurt it. The other 4 markets just never really worked from day one when we launched them. And that was DC, Miami, Austin, Oakland. I'll just use the analogy of Austin. When you do a Google search of Austin population, you'll say like 1.2 million. Okay. But the actual urban core of Austin, not the suburban Austin, urban core of Austin, how many people live there? Like 150,000.
Wow.
That's like less than Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
When you actually look at just like the amount of essentially TAM of a city, when you go to these tier 2 cities, smaller cities, less population, less density, it's just really hard to get those 3, 4, 5 trips a day per vehicle. You end up at 1. Okay, that doesn't work.
Even though the Revel mopeds were a hit in New York, the unit economics just didn't work in less densely populated cities. But all was not lost, because those attempts at expansion got Frank thinking.
As we expanded this moped business, our first expansion was Washington, D.C. in the summer of 2019. And then we went into Austin and Miami in the fall of 2019. Then Oakland and San Francisco in early 2020. So we kept expanding this business. The barrier to expansion wasn't capital. Clearly, we just raised a Series A. We had the capital. It wasn't some sort of technology. It was not permits. Revel, of all the micromobility companies in the history of micromobility, especially during that boom phase of 2018, 2019, we never launched anywhere without permission from the city. In fact, we even changed Texas state law to allow entry into Austin. People don't really know that, but that was one thing we did before we even approached the city. What stopped our expansion, or what delayed a lot of our expansion, what made expansion so frustrating, was I wasn't able to find locations in all of these cities where you could have, let's say, a megawatt of power in some sort of industrial area to charge 3, 4, 500 moped batteries at once. Mm-hmm. Couldn't do it. Just didn't exist. It didn't matter what I wanted to pay for rent. It didn't exist. So here I am thinking, okay, every truck, bus, car is going to go electric in the next 10, 15 years. And I can't find a place in these cities to charge friggin' moped batteries.
Yeah.
So that really opened up our eyes to this problem of how constricted grids are in urban areas, how entire swaths of cities like San Francisco and DC and LA and New York, it doesn't matter if you want a power grid, you're not getting it for 10, 15 years until they upgrade the substation 5 blocks away in 2036. Right? Yeah. So just grids are so maxed out. So my co-founder and I really just started to dig into this problem more. And we thought, okay, what is the problem here in urban areas? This is chicken and egg problem, right? nobody really has an EV because there's no fast charging infrastructure anywhere in these markets. And you can't put up all this capital for fast charging infrastructure unless there's a bunch of EVs providing utilization and cash flow and revenue. So here we are sitting here even today in 2024, and a lot of these cities just don't have a public charging network.
Yeah.
Right? So we came at the problem as, okay, how do we solve this chicken and egg problem with charging infrastructure and charging infrastructure demand? Is let's bring both together. So let's go out and build this public fast charging network in a city like New York, and let's pair it with our own capital utilization source. And we thought, okay, what's the biggest mobility market by far to bring capital utilization? It's rideshare, right? A city like New York has 110,000 rideshare vehicles.
Wow.
If you're going to go after a mobility market to bring capital utilization, you got to go after rideshare, or else it's peanuts. So that's what we ended up doing. So by the summer of 2021, I can talk more about how we got the capital and how we got internal and external folks on board, but we ended up launching a 25 fast charger site in Bedside, Brooklyn, and paired that with a pilot 50 EV fleet for this rideshare service.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, local two-sided network models, OpenTable and Grubhub, who I was involved with both of those, have the same problem. And in both of those, and sounds like what you did, is we seeded one side of the network, right? It's hard to get chicken or egg first. You got to go build the chickens or go build the eggs to make that work. And so how do you do it in a way that actually starts to create the cycle itself? But it's interesting for you to come and solve both sides of that problem at the same time, right? Bring the chickens and the eggs together to make it happen.
And what's really interesting right now is the team internally, the language you're using is the egg is getting broken right now. Mm-hmm. So if you take New York City as an example, now we're sitting here 2.5 years later after that initial site opening and that initial 50 EV launch. Now we have over 500 EVs in our all electric rideshare service. We have 4 of the largest public charging sites in New York. We're adding a 5th, doing a site opening in Lower East Side during Climate Week. We're adding a site in December. Haven't publicly announced it yet, but it's coming. And then we're adding 3 sites in 2025 that are all 48 stalls or more, right, in New York.
Wow.
So we're adding a ton of infrastructure, continuing to scale our rideshare service. But what's interesting now is now other folks are electrifying. There's additional utilization out there. So for instance, we partnered with Uber this past spring and went live just a month ago, where they're providing another base level amount of utilization to our next several hundred stalls that we're building here in New York. So we're now building this pyramid of demand to our infrastructure. You have Revel rideshare. Now we have Uber and their guarantee of a certain amount of utilization. And now we're going after other third-party fleets. For instance, the city of New York and their 10,000 police department vehicles that are going electric by the end of the decade, right? So you're starting to build this pyramid of demand for us to just run away with the market and fast charging for a city like New York, right?
Yeah.
But it all started with our own kind of engine 3 years ago.
Yeah. So let's go back to that 3 years ago. You've got investors, right? You've raised money on a certain thesis, and then you're like, hey, raising your hand to your investors, hey, we think there's a better thesis here. I mean, that takes a lot of courage for an entrepreneur to be able to have those frank discussions with their investors. Did you approach your investors, or how did that work?
Before you approach any investor, external or your own board or internal, the most important stakeholder is your own team.
Yep.
Right. So that's priority number 1. Getting your own leadership team on board, getting their buy-in. Why would we do a pilot like this? We're a moped company. What are you doing? So before you talk to anybody, it's your own team.
Yeah.
And I think people forget about that. Because if you don't have a team, you're not doing anything. And if you don't have a team bought in, you're definitely not doing anything. And I'll be honest with you, we lost some people. Some people didn't believe in that and what we were doing. And that's okay. Let's part ways. We're keeping the team that does believe in this. So first is internal. That was like end of 2019 into 2020. Then we started to basically put together almost like a small team led by my co-founder to start to figure this out. Forget about money. What do we want to launch initially? What are we trying to test? What are we trying to pilot? So that was spring of 2020. And then by the summer of 2020, we started to go in front of our board talking about that pilot. Hey, we have this moped business. This is what's going well. This is not what's going well. But we also see this opportunity in 4 wheels. I want to do a pilot. And yeah, of course there was some pushback. I remember one board member just straight up, just flat out said no. And I had to have several conversations with him and his team as to why this is a good idea and why it's good for the company and why we should pursue it. So by no means was it just like unanimous, this is a great thing. It took a lot of legwork and groundwork and preparation and then just, frankly, not taking no for an answer.
Good. Yeah. And I think that journey of when a company does pivot or see a new direction to start to head to, a lot of times they're not great at making sure that the people on the bus are the people who should be on the bus, just because skills and capabilities and needs change in an organization sometimes. And sometimes it's very hard for leaders to have that discussion or know that they need to go make those changes within the organization. And so you get a little bloat. And so it does take a lot of courage for you as a leader to be able to do that. Constraints is a good thing for a company, and being able to operate more efficiently is super important. Kudos on that. So what were some of the big lessons that you learned on that initial charging station? Like, what were there anything that was like an aha or eureka moment that really helped reinforce the business model?
The first thing that came to my mind is that initial site, 25 fast chargers in Bedside, Brooklyn, we opened in the summer of 2021. It was too easy. We signed that lease in December 2020.
Yeah.
And we went live with a ribbon cutting with the Secretary of Energy in June of 2021, 6 months later. That is unheard of. That is not realistic.
What do you attribute to that?
Our aligned, obviously a team that was just killing it and just didn't let anything fall through the gaps. But also, let's be honest here, Chuck, we got lucky a little bit. So that was just every star aligned, the perfect site. Nothing weird happened with permitting or zone. Like everything just went through. So it was one of those aha moments. That's not realistic. Talk to any operator out there, even all the sites we're building now. It's harder than that. It's a lot harder than that. So it's interesting. We almost like that first site was too easy. And then we had all these projections. Oh, we'll build this many more next year. Not every site's a 6-month timeline. A lot of sites are 2 or 3 years. That's much more realistic. I think we're much more clear right now.
Well, I mean, again, that's good to know also, right? Like sometimes it's better to be lucky and good out of the gate, and we'll take serendipity because that's certainly a friend of the entrepreneur as well. I can attest to that too.
The first project might have set an unrealistic standard, but the Revel team has managed to continue to build out their portfolio of charging stations. Today, their pipeline even includes the country's largest airport EV fast charging station at LaGuardia in Queens, New York. Frank says that partnerships with regulatory bodies and other companies in the space have been key to expanding their footprint.
Just think about our relationship with Con Edison here in New York as an example. We're at the point now where they understand how much of a serious player we are with our pipeline of projects and what we're trying to do to electrify transportation in New York and how important we are to their goals. So that kind of partnership, that kind of just, we're in this together. Nothing gets done unless you have the private company, private capital, private operator working hand in hand with the utility and all the other regulators. And that didn't happen overnight. It's taken us 4 years to get here, right?
Yeah, totally. A lot of companies view regulatory as like the enemy rather than your friend, right? But how do you help them work with you and solve their problems while you're hopefully solving problems for consumers and something that's needed? If we are going to electrify here, we are going to need these charging stations, right? And then you said that earlier too about every city you went into, you had permits to do it and all that stuff like that. So you've really leaned into embracing the infrastructure that's there and working with it then, right?
I could not reinforce your point more. There is no way a company like us is successful unless government, and I'm calling utility as governments because they're investor owned, but essentially it's government. Unless those folks see you as we're all helping each other to reach common goals and we're in this together. Any sort of adversarial relationship, you're not going to get anything done. I think mopeds, that business, just put that into our DNA. Working with cities, working on permits. Every city we went into, we had to negotiate, what does a moped permit look like? How do we launch this? Here's what we're delivering to the cities. This is why this is a good thing. So that just DNA, that was from day one.
Yeah. And so this agreement with Uber, so working with quote unquote competitors to some degree. So did you approach them? Did they approach you? What was the process there?
It's a good question. I think from the Uber partnership and what we signed in the spring and just went live last month with their drivers here in New York, I think anytime you see an agreement like that, it's not because it happened overnight. It happens because conversations start a long time ago, a relationship builds, and then there's an opportunity to do something really interesting together. And that's what led to this. I think the other sort of tailwind, just instigator of that partnership is in November of last year, New York City mandated all rideshare in New York City has to be electric by 2030, same as the state of California. So over 100,000 vehicles in New York that need to essentially charge every single day have to be electric in 5 years, right? And Uber supported it full throttle. So because they supported it, this regulation is rolled out now. We're all working together to actually make this a reality now. So I would say the regulatory environment has helped push this partnership as well.
And when you look at who is using Revel's charging stations today, their partnership with Uber makes even more sense.
We have the ability to know a lot about our customer in New York because, one, we have license plate readers at every single stall. Mm-hmm. So we know the license plate of every user that comes to our charging stations right now. And in New York, there's a very clear license plate for if you're a rideshare driver. I would say about 75-80% of our demand is rideshare drivers. It's crazy because they're the ultimate customer. They need to charge every single day. This is their employment. This is someone that drives 60 hours a week, 6 days a week.
Yeah.
So that's been the majority of our demand. That's why I'm so excited about the electrification mandates on rideshare. Because when you think about what is something that just accelerates the build out of a charging network in an urban environment, man, electrification of rideshare is absolutely number one.
And so it's a little bit of capital intensity, right? With the space and the charging and the interconnect and a lot of the work that you need to do. How do you continue to get investors excited about the work you're doing, and what's been your main message to them in this? Like, what has gotten them excited to continue to support you?
What's exciting is that we have some of the largest fast charging sites in the country right here in New York, and we're driving some of the highest utilization rates in the country. So across our network, we're driving utilization rates of over 35%, right? Once you start hitting 45%, you start having pretty consistent queuing, right? So when you ask what gets investors excited right now, and we're having a lot of those phone calls right now, is, hey, come look at the data. Come visit our site at 4 p.m. There's a line of cars out the door trying to charge and find stalls. The need for fast charging in urban environments is so great. So I think everyone's hearing mixed messages in the media right now about EV adoption and what's the pace and EVs are dead. All I know is demand for fast charging in a city like New York far outstrips supply. Look at our data. We need to build a lot more fast charging, especially if 100,000 rideshare vehicles are going electric by 2030. Right? So for me, it's just look at the facts.
Yeah. If you think about it, the internet didn't go away after its struggles in 99 and 2000. It's done okay since then. Sometimes that blip is good because it separates the wheat from the chaff, right? So now you're getting lots of data on these sites. How have you thought about increasing utilization rates? Is there a variable pricing model where if you do come at 4 and there's a line, it's a little bit more expensive? Is there models you've looked at, and how are you optimizing this to get to that 40-45%?
It's such a good question because we're having those conversations daily right now as a team. What is our time of use pricing strategy? What do we want to test? If we offer a discount, are we actually driving more demand at a different time when there's low utilization, or are we just giving a discount and losing margin?
Yeah.
So these are absolutely all things that we're starting to implement, to test. I think this Uber partnership also helps with some of that as well. Because part of the partnership, sure, you're guaranteeing a certain level of utilization for us, but we're also giving all of your drivers a discount. So do we drive more utilization with that discount? So there's so much learning that we're doing right now, Chuck.
Yeah.
And how we implement pricing moving forward from a very static, just rack rate that we have right now, it's going to be informed by what we learn in the next 3, 6, 9 months.
When it comes to the opportunity for clean energy infrastructure, there are still so many unknowns. Frank offered some examples to illustrate how dynamic the situation is.
Depending on what you put into your financial model, things drastically look different. One of those is just car charging speeds, right? Is the average charge session 10 years from now 12 minutes, or is it 23? Because that drastically changes throughput through a stall, electrons through a stall, the amount of revenue you can push through a stall, and it drastically changes your economics of that site. So even something as simple as, what is your assumption of charging average speed for cars in 2028, 2032, 2036? That completely changes the economics of that site. Completely. Yeah. So it's just one of those little things that unless you're like in the nitty gritty and actually understand this business, like that's one of those things that can completely change the economics of your network. Especially when you're signing leases like us that are 25, 35, 40 years in length.
Yeah.
You're not taking a 5-year view.
Yeah. So these charging stations, what is your vision of the future and where you think the real value or the ultimate value is going to be for you guys?
Yeah. We talk about this internally a lot as a company. Our mission statement is accelerating EV adoption in cities. Right? Yeah. So when I think about our business, I think about rideshare supporting the acceleration of our infrastructure build out.
Okay.
First and foremost. I also think about us as a company strategy. We're very geographically focused. So the way we win is by being so geographically focused. Or I'd say one of several things, but I would say that might be number one. I'm not building in suburban areas. I'm not building in rural areas. I'm not building for range anxiety on highways somewhere in Pennsylvania or Virginia. I care about how do I put 1,000 fast chargers in really strategic locations in New York for anybody else puts 100, right? So it's just geographic focus, developing the relationships in a market like New York across utilities, across politicians, across regulators, across even our own team, and having our team so geographically focused on one market. We already have more market share in public fast charging in New York than anybody else. Now I just want to extend that lead and go for it. Mm-hmm. The cities are also where you can build a competitive moat around infrastructure because the grid is so constrained. And the grid might be the number one problem, but there's other problems in cities. People don't talk enough about permitting. Department of Buildings, Department of Transportation. What if you need to put the Con Ed transformer in the sidewalk and you need specific approval from the Department of Transportation to do that? Or you need to move a fire hydrant in order to drop that transformer into the sidewalk. You need fire department approval. So there's so many things here. Zoning, land use, planning commission, land use commission. Actually finding a rational landlord, even if everything else lines up, a rational landlord that wants to charge a reasonable rent to actually get a deal done. That's a whole other problem. So you can see why I'm so excited about being the fast charging network in these dense urban areas, because even if somebody comes with billions in capital later this decade, I've already picked over the whole city and found the best spots. So that's our strategy. And we're using our rideshare business here in New York to accelerate all of that.
So as a CEO and co-founder, what's been your philosophy on leadership? Because it seems like you have a very active, let's test and iterate and learn and get out in the wild and talk to people and not just sit around and hypothesize about things. So how do you lead throughout your organization?
It's a really good question because, man, Chuck, I'm still trying to figure it out, right? 7 years in, there's one thing I know as CEO, which is I learn a lot every single day and I make a lot of mistakes. But if I had to break it down, I think if you asked Revel employees, what is Frank's style or what is the culture here? I think is also the question you're getting at, because my style is also the culture. I think it translates down. It's low ego. It is showing empathy to most situations, especially to the other side of the table, even when it's internal. Because a lot of times you don't know everything and you need to just come to a situation with that empathetic mindset. I think the other one is ownership and action oriented. I think people will say, if you talk to them here, is one of the things I always say at the end of a meeting, which is, okay, what are the next steps? What are we doing? What is most important coming out of this meeting and who's owning it, right? So action-oriented ownership, that's how we've survived the last 7 years. Without that, we would have died a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I'm a huge fan of that mindset as well. Frank, thank you for your time today. Congrats on your successes so far, and looking forward to continuing to watch you guys grow this charging infrastructure and obviously bringing in world-class ride sharing. So thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to the S2G podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, or share it with a friend. For more information or to connect with us, check out s2gventures.com.